In our headlines on this Monday, December 2nd, here in South Korea, a parliamentary vote on the government-proposed budget bill for 2025 is postponed as rival political parties continue to clash as opposition lawmakers call for a substantial cut. And President Yoon pledges to prop up small businesses with the allocation of the largest ever budget of 5.9 trillion Korean won or $4.2 billion US. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy reaffirms North Korean troop casualties on the battlefield while reiterating the need for NATO membership to leverage a ceasefire with Russia. We start at the parliament here, where the vote on next year's budget bill has been postponed as lawmakers across the aisle continue to lock horns over its size. Our correspondent Lee starts us off.
Hours before the plenary session scheduled for Monday, where the year 2025 budget was originally expected to be introduced, National Assembly Speaker Woo announced the postponement of the budget review as the rival parties continue to dispute the details. In an urgent conference, Woo said he is holding off until the budget can sufficiently instill hope in the financially vulnerable people in the country.
The National Assembly holds the responsibility to set the budget so it can stabilize people's livelihoods and the economy, which is as important as following the legal deadline.
He's urging for speedy negotiations between the rival lawmakers as they struggle to meet halfway.
I make a stern request to the rival parties. We must pass the budget by December 10th, the day our regular session ends.
Throughout the budget-making process that began over a month ago, the ruling party has been insisting on full parliamentary support for the government-proposed budget of over 677.4 trillion Korean won. But the National Assembly's opposition-controlled Budget Review Committee has reduced the budget by over 4 trillion won, unilaterally at 673.3 trillion Korean won. Among the most reduced, reserve expenses and the expenses for special activities for the president's office and the prosecution. On Monday, the opposition had planned to pass the reduced budget through an assembly-wide vote. But a strong pushback from the ruling party leading up to the meeting halted the plan, as the PPP called the move an attempt to paralyze the government administration. The PPP urged the DP to take back its proposal and warned that there will be no further negotiations unless it does so. The DP insisted it is nonsensical that the government can't run properly without the reduced budget. It's expected the tensions will continue until the rival parties attempt to reach the middle ground throughout this month. Lee-hoo, Arirang News.
Findings for November show exports rose on year but marked their slowest pace in months. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun reports.
South Korea's exports continued their upward trend in November, driven by the booming semiconductor industry, though concerns are mounting over a potential slowdown in export momentum. Data from the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Sunday show that the country's exports totaled $56.35 billion in November, up 1.4% from the same month last year and marking 14 consecutive months of growth. This brings the trade balance to a surplus of $5.61 billion, underscoring the vital role of exports in supporting South Korea's economy. Semiconductors, the country's largest export item, reached a record high for November, as it jumped by more than 30% year-on-year to $12.5 billion. However, automobile exports fell by nearly 14% to $5.6 billion due to production disruptions caused by labor disputes and adverse weather conditions that delayed shipments. While electric vehicle exports fell amid a global slowdown in EV demand, hybrid vehicle exports surged by more than 50%. Of the 15 countries' major export items, 5 showed increases while 10 saw declines. Despite the 14 consecutive months of export growth, concerns are rising about the slowing growth rate. November's 1.4% increase is the smallest since the rebound began in October last year. Exports to South Korea's two largest markets, the United States and China, also dropped year-on-year. This decline was attributed to factors such as the economic slowdown in China and the decline in exports of automobiles and general machinery to the U.S. There is also growing uncertainty surrounding U.S.-China trade tensions and their potential to further dampen export growth. The Bank of Korea cited the decline in export volumes during the third quarter as a key reason behind its decision to lower interest rates twice in a row. The central bank also noted that while global AI investment could support export growth, challenges such as China's increasing self-sufficiency and technological competitiveness, as well as U.S. protectionist policies, could hinder progress. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Also on the local front, President Yoon has pledged to prop up small businesses to ease social polarization. The pledge was made during his policy discussion on this Monday with members of the public in the city of Gongju, where he shared a series of support measures for small businesses and for the self-employed. They include the allocation of the largest ever budget of 5.9 trillion Korean won, or $4.2 billion, as well as lower delivery fees for small business owners and ways to crack down on no-show diners at restaurants. On the international front, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's latest nominations for key posts are sparking concerns of nepotism. Our Hyo-shin explains.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has started nominations for his administration, and the latest are the father-in-laws of his daughters, which highlights his reliance on close friends and family members. On Sunday, the president-elect named billionaire Massad Boulos to serve as his senior advisor on Arab and Middle Eastern affairs. Acknowledging Boulos's influence on Arab Americans and Muslim leaders during the election campaign, Trump also described the Lebanese-American businessman as a highly respected leader in the business world with extensive experience on the international scene, and a deal-maker and unwavering supporter of peace in the Middle East. In his announcement on Truth Social, Trump did not mention that Massad Boulos is the father-in-law of his daughter Tiffany. This was following his announcement on Saturday that real estate developer Charles Kushner is his pick to serve as the next U.S. ambassador to France. Kushner is the father-in-law of his daughter Ivanka. Trump called Kushner a strong advocate for the United States, whom he also pardoned in 2020 following a 2005 conviction on federal charges, including tax evasion. Also on Saturday, Trump announced his pick of former aide Kash Patel to lead the FBI. During Trump's first term, Patel advised the Director of National Intelligence and the Defense Secretary, which drew animosity from some security officials who saw him as volatile. While some Democrats have voiced concerns that the law enforcement agency would become politicized, some Republican senators support Patel, believing he would clean out the corrupted partisans running the agency. But for Patel to take the position immediately, incumbent Director Christopher Wray will either have to resign or be fired. Appointed by Trump in 2017, his 10-year term doesn't end until 2027. Donald Trump has been known to pick loyal allies, and his latest selection for critical posts shows that he will be continuing his precedent of leaning on trusted family members in his second term. But it is also raising questions about conflicts of interest and nepotism. Hyo-shin, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea's Consul General to Shanghai, Kim Yong-jun, believes Chinese President Xi Jinping's attendance of next year's APEC summit to be held in Korea's coastal city of Gongju may pave the path to better ties. Speaking to members of the Korean media in Shanghai last week, Kim also asserted the time had come for the two countries to enhance their ties, given China's visa exemption for Korean travelers and an upcoming patent-related meeting among Korea, China and Japan. Kim claimed that bilateral ties would likely see positive momentum if Xi Jinping were to attend the upcoming APEC gathering in Korea. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has reaffirmed North Korean troop casualties on the battlefield while reiterating the need for NATO membership to leverage a ceasefire deal with Russia. Our Lee Sing-jae has details.
In an exclusive interview with Japan's Kyodo News, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy said Sunday that a number of North Korean troops deployed to Russia's Kursk region had been killed in action. Zelenskyy did not say how many soldiers had been killed or wounded so far, but said that it's almost certain that the troops were to be used as cannon fodder. The Ukrainian president also stressed that support for his country from its partners is not enough, and again stressed the need for NATO membership, saying the war has entered a complicated period, with Russia advancing faster in the eastern part of Ukraine. Also on Sunday, 3 senior EU officials made a surprise visit to Kyiv to hold talks with Zelenskyy on how to bolster support from the bloc. EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy Kaja Kallas, European Council President Antonio Costa, and Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos were all in Kyiv for the meeting. After the talks, Costa announced that the EU will continue to provide Ukraine with financial assistance, including a monthly payment of 1.5 billion euros for a full year. The money would come from the proceeds of Russia's frozen assets and can be used for military purposes. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has upped his push to win the war, approving a record-high military budget for the 2025 fiscal year. According to the Russian government's website on Sunday, around 32.5% of the budget drawn up for 2025 has been allocated for national defense, amounting to around $145 billion. With the foreign ministers of the 32 NATO countries holding their last meeting of the year later this week, a meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council consultative body is also scheduled. There, the Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha is likely to push for Ukraine's membership of the military alliance. President Zelenskyy, during an interview with British broadcaster Sky News, said membership will allow him to negotiate a ceasefire deal with Russia. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Over in Syria, opposition forces there have marked a dramatic advance across the northern part of the country, gaining control of Aleppo, the economic capital, as Syria's allies, including Russia, remain preoccupied with their own troubles. Our Kim Bo-kyung has the latest.
Just as a ceasefire began between Hezbollah and Israel, another conflict flared up in the Middle East, this time in Syria. On Sunday, Syrian military rushed reinforcements to the northwest of the country, and both Syrian and Russian aircraft carried out a series of strikes on insurgents who have seized the country's second-largest city of Aleppo. More than 370 people, including dozens of civilians, have so far been killed, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Rebel groups are now pushing south toward the neighboring city of Hama, coming on the 5th day of the surprise offensive. The rebels, led by the Islamist group Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and allied factions, began the assault last Wednesday, leading Syrian forces to announce a temporary troop withdrawal on Saturday, citing the need to regroup for a counter-offensive. The fighting marks a major escalation in Syria's years-long civil war, which began with popular uprisings across the country in 2011. The conflict had mostly remained stagnated since 2020, with the rebel groups having been largely contained to a small portion of Idlib province. That is why one expert called this one of the biggest challenges President Bashar al-Assad now faces.
It's one of the biggest challenges that Bashar al-Assad has ever had to face during his time as Syrian leader since 2000 and since the civil war began in 2011. It's very similar to the situation that he found himself in when the civil war first began.
Russia and Iran, Assad's primary allies, both vowed support, with the Kremlin having condemned the rebel offensive and have called for the swift restoration of constitutional order in the region. Iran dispatched its top diplomat Abbas Araghchi, who met with the Syrian president in Damascus on Sunday, saying Tehran would firmly support him in confronting terrorist attacks. However, with Russia's attention divided by the ongoing war against Ukraine and recent Israeli airstrikes having weakened Hezbollah as a fighting force, thereby diminishing Iran's capacity to assist Syria, experts say such a loss of critical support complicates Assad's position. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Back here on the local front, a marathon meeting in Busan that began last Monday ended in the early hours of this Monday morning without an agreement on ending plastic pollution. The 5th UN Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee meeting was initially scheduled to be the final session for countries to agree to a legally binding global treaty on limiting production and phasing out harmful chemicals. But instead of a treaty, negotiators have agreed for more talks next year, as wide divisions persist over calls for production limitation. In other news, efforts to help Korea's small towns survive and thrive continue. And in one such place, young people have been rolling up their sleeves. Our Park Go-nu was there.
Rejuvenating previously abandoned spaces. Jaemincheon village, once at the epicenter of Gongju city, located in Chungcheongnam-do province, had been abandoned for many years. That's until several young people, relocated from other areas including the capital region, started revitalizing vacant houses and unused spaces with the support of the Interior Ministry.
This old house was once a tailor shop but was abandoned for many years. But now, thanks to the creativity and dedication of young people who have moved into this area, it has been transformed into an inviting and cozy cafe.
These remodeled structures built decades ago have not just turned into cafes, but also restaurants and guest houses and hotels with the creative ideas of young resettlers. Thanks to these efforts, the total population, which includes residents and the floating population like tourists, has been rising continuously. Over 126,000 more people were added to that total population in Q2 of 2024 compared to the previous quarter. That's especially noticeable as Gongju City has been designated by the Interior Ministry as one of the 89 areas in Korea seeing a population shrink. One young worker who moved into the area says there's still some space for improvement.
It's still lacking in infrastructure for young people to come here. I hope that in the near future, it can become a neighborhood where those young people can live a happier life while doing what they want.
However, despite some inconveniences, one young restaurant owner says that can be a strength.
Seoul is very complex, competitive, and things are built and they disappear quickly. It's a much slower pace here, and I find that more attractive. Local residents are very friendly, enough to help you and give advice, which has been really encouraging.
She added she wishes to keep living as a small local restaurant owner even in the future, so that she can keep introducing the beauty of Korean food to people visiting the region. Park Go-nu, Arirang News, Gongju.
And on the K-pop front, the duet Winter Ahead by BTS's V and Park Hyo-shin has topped the iTunes chart. The song topped the charts in 75 countries, including the UK, following its release last Friday. That was November 29th. According to V's agency, Big Hit Entertainment, the music video also hit #1 on the YouTube music video chart. Winter Ahead is a jazz pop song with a soothing melody.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. Thousands of pro-EU protesters in the Georgian capital, Tbilisi, continued for a fourth night on Sunday, following Thursday's announcement that the country's government would freeze EU accession talks for 4 years. Tensions are yet to subside as some protesters gathered in Tbilisi's central Rustaveli Avenue were seen shooting fireworks toward police, who retaliated with water cannons and tear gas. Georgian news agency Interpress reported that protesters also blocked a road into the country's main commercial port in the Black Sea city of Poti. According to local media, protests were seen in at least 8 cities and towns against the ruling Georgian Dream Party. The pro-Western Georgian president, Salome Zurabichvili, whose term is about to expire, called the current parliament illegitimate following allegations of fraud in last month's elections, while saying she would remain in office until new parliamentary elections are held. Moving over to the UK, a Second World War bunker near the southern English city of Portsmouth hosted the first ever fully underground British marathon on Saturday. A total of 87 runners participated in the unique run, with head torches attached to their helmets, running a total of 91 laps of a makeshift 460-meter course to complete the full 42.195 kilometers. After running almost 100 laps in the dark, narrow and damp tunnels, 48-year-old Michael Burke won the men's race in 3 hours, 42 minutes and 27 seconds, while Laura Watts won the women's race with a time of 4 hours and 22 minutes. Now another underground race will take place at the same venue next November. In India, hundreds of expectant mothers gathered for a mass baby shower organized at a local religious fair on Sunday. The fair, dedicated to the Hindu goddess Dhanama Devi, took place in the country's southern city of Haveri, where the female participants wore colorful traditional Indian saris and were given flower crowns as part of the ritual ceremony. The pregnant mothers received gifts of a variety of food items, including mangoes, tamarind, and pickled cucumber, as elderly women blessed them. Now, one participant said that she felt very lucky to participate in the function. Kim Xiang, Arirang News.
After heavy snow all over the country last week, winter blast started. However, with temporarily warm southwesterly winds, there was no severe cold today. From tomorrow, sub-zero temperatures will make a return across the country. Seoul will plunge to -4 degrees Celsius in the morning. Morning cold spells will continue for a while. It will stay around 3 degrees during the daytime. In the meantime, there will be strong winds of around 50 meters per second in most parts of the country until tomorrow. Please secure facilities in advance. A much colder morning is in store tomorrow in other regions as well. Daejeon -3, Chuncheon -5 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 7 degrees in Gwangju, Daegu, and Gongju, Busan 12 degrees. From Friday, more rain and snow are forecast in the Jeollado provinces and on Jeju Island. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session with members of the media. And today we touch upon Seoul's ties with Tokyo. Do stay with us.